Hello, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Andre, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
What about the other folks calling in? Who do we have?
Lindsay's supposed to be calling in from her car. Is she on? I can't see those tiny little words.
Well, it just says phone number.
And anybody calling in, can you speak up and let us identify which numbers are who?
One says something Evans. Carrie.
Hey, this is Rich. I can hear you.
Okay, Richard, thanks, we got you.
That's our attorney.
Okay.
Is this your name?
Yeah.
Diane is not here.
Lindsay, is that you, the 1-267-304-4277 number? You can hear me?
David, that's me. My Zoom is all screwed up, so I'm dialed in and on the.
Okay. Gotcha. Thanks, Richard.
All right, so let's call this meeting to order. And first thing we do is attendance.
We need to do a roll call attendance because it's.
Okay, since we're online, I'll do a roll call. So Andrea Bennett.
Present.
Dave Mays.
Present.
David Ingram.
Present.
Richard Smith.
Present. He just stopped.
Okay.
I'm present.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks. Evan Bull.
Here.
Lindsay Hallett. PJ Klein.
Present.
Jessica Cannon.
Present.
Sean Sullivan.
Present.
Kat Holman present. Owen Wexler. Awesome. So with that, we will move into our first agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes.
We need to
Excuse us.
excuse anybody? Anybody have any absences?
Owen, Lindsay.
What's your question? I said, do we have to excuse anyone? What was the next? Absent.
If we need to excuse them, we'll have to cover their absences with the clerk in terms of their attendance, but that's not our responsibility.
I already talked about it last time, Bob.
Okay.
Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? If not.
Madam Chair, real quick, did we see if there wasn't a quorum at any date? We'll just need that on the minutes.
What was that for?
We'll just need the chair to say that there is in fact a quorum.
There is in fact quorum. Thank you. If there are no edits to the minutes, can I get a motion?
So moved?
I'll second.
Excellent. And we'll move into the next agenda item, which is the NC Clean Transportation. Oh, man. Okay, yep. So we'll vote on the approval of the minutes from the last time. I'll go around again. Sorry. Andrea?
Yes.
Awesome. Richard?
just approving the minutes.
Do you agree with the minutes, Andrea?
I do.
Yes.
Did we have a motion to approve the minutes? I apologize, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay, Richard, do you,
We always looks like.
oh, okay. Evan,
Uh,
Jessica,
Aye.
Sean,
aye.
PJ.
Aye.
Y'all don't vote. And I also vote aye. Awesome. Anything else before we move on? I always forget that part, thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is, hard to pull up on my phone, is the NC Clean Transportation Plan Working Groups.
Which, yeah, we really, just wanted to, share that as a discussion point. Just so that you can hear me as well. So the North Carolina Free Clean Transportation Plan and its working groups was really just kind of kicked off last week. Dave and I both joined a couple of different working groups. Dave was on the medium, heavy duty working group, so it's looking at ways that we can address the state clean energy plan. So they're looking for public input as well as, different interest groups, whether you're local governments or private sector, to join the working groups and provide comment. It's going to be, I think working group comment is basically a year-long process, and hold several meetings. There's an opportunity for, if you all were interested, to join as well as to, kind of look at the working groups and maybe it's interest, it's not a requirement or anything, but they're looking for any kind of public input that they can receive. I think there's also a survey out there that I encourage everyone to take a look at and take a link on that. So, I joined the fleet transformation working group, which is certainly going to be an area where we'll rely on as we electrify our fleet. So I certainly want to provide input into that section, and as well as stay on top of the planning efforts that are coming out of that working group. So I really just want to make you guys aware of that. It's one of the areas we're working on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and as we go through our processes for our different work groups, we might be bringing questions and y'all for input so that we can, y'all are welcome, entirely open to the public. So if y'all want to join work groups and participate yourself, there are 5 separate work groups, so feel free. But we'll be bringing questions back and hopefully get some input from y'all along the way for how we can continue with our, the advocacy of this group.
What's the name of it again? The
North Carolina Clean Transportation Plan.
And so there's 5 different groups, all have different items of interest.
Yeah, there's like
There's a light duty, there's a medium to heavy duty group, there's the infrastructure group that's talking about trying to put the electrification infrastructure out there.
there's a neighborhood group too.
So it's a big footprint, with a lot of interest out there. But the survey that Dave's talking about is the link is right there in the agenda.
Okay.
And I think it will be open until the end of this month. So if you have a chance to fill it out and go to it, that'd be a good thing. Get more feedback from our area.
And you mentioned sharing that as well, correct? That we can share with our other organizations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're encouraging anyone to share it within their social media groups, wherever they're looking for wide input as they can get, so.
All right, putting that on my to-do list.
Yes, they had the first working group meetings last week, which really was kind of introductory, everybody together. Definitely a wide range of interests there, people participating in the whole group I was in, so.
Is it like a Zoom meeting with,
It's all virtual. You have to join the work group and they'll send you communication.
And I have to say, I was impressed, it was very well done, much better than our current Zoom experience now, but it was very well done. They've got support staff with each group. They've usually got a consultant. Kim and Warren is the consultant helping them develop plans.
Kimberly Warren.
Kim and Warren, and so there's usually a staff member and a consultant associated with each of the work groups.
Okay.
Is this a DOT project?
It's, yes, it was DOT, but you know, it's all in regard to meeting the governor's section of, so this is that they were requested to put a plan together, so this is the plan together for North Carolina, so pretty important stuff. Any questions there, Kevin?
In that case, I think we can move on to the next item, number 3, which is current clean energy percentage of municipal operations. Which you have this in front of you.
Who doesn't have a great pie chart?
I love all of the optics of Dave's work. Printed and charted.
Pretty simple, straightforward.
I love to use brown for the fossil fuel.
Yeah,
Clean energy.
I went through 2 different colors, so I could, what looks kind of dirty. Yeah, so, Andrea, can you see that, the slide on the screen as well?
It's not on the screen, but I've got it pulled up on my computer, so I'm fine.
Sharing, but.
It's sharing the Zoom tab right now.
Sure, it's sharing a different tab.
Let me see. Let's see if I can fix it. Just. That better?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, so just looking at the pie chart itself, you can see the 48.3% in green. That's Duke's current grid mix per the EPA eGrid 2020 information. I think I shared that resource mix chart with y'all with the group earlier. Of course, I list there kind of what they're considering clean. The 1.3% is what the city is producing through its 4 solar production sites, which I have listed here on the left-hand side. So those 2 quantities combined to do the Duke clean mix as well as the cities brings us 49.6%. Which of course is just 0.4% below the city's goal of 50% clean energy by 2035. So as you see, we're not far away from that. Again, you know, whether we are aggressive enough with that initial goal or not is one thing we'll certainly discuss. But I think we will certainly achieve that 2035 goal, particularly with with some of the new stuff that's perhaps coming online here in the next, what, 2 years maybe, by the time new projects are happening.
Yes.
We have a,
Sorry, yes.
Are you talking about new projects from the city?
we have a city fire station that we are hoping to get some solar panels on top of, although that project's currently over budget, so we're actually looking at some grants that allow us to do. And we also have another project that's for the new Parks and Rec maintenance facility. That one that's at the end of South Front Street now, between the
Across the street from the Ridgeville Lake.
where that's going to be moving. Because that area is flooding all the time. The facility is in design phase right now, and also looking to renewable energy beds. I didn't calculate how many kilowatts would equal at 0.4%, but as well as what, I guess the MLK.
The second gymnasium that will be constructed at the MLK Center will at least be solar rated. If I know everything's over budget right now.
Are there any, this to me brings up a lot of different points, and so like, it's probably the case that we don't need to do anything if we get this, because Duke's gonna improve their footprint. Is that fair to say?
You're continuing to work,
So to your comment, I'd be curious at how much this reality played into the commitment that we made. Like, was this known when we made the 50% commitment?
No.
It was not. So
That
that's,
just came out of House Bill 951.
that's pretty interesting. Because it struck me to connect to the next point, but not to go all the way there, just that other cities were way ahead of our commitments. It seemed like everybody else was more, other than Winston-Salem was at like 80%. So I was curious how that 50% was come up with. Was it just plucked out of the air as a round number, more or less, for 2035?
Yeah, well, we certainly, again, we didn't know entirely what the Duke's grid was going to look like at that point. But we were looking at numbers that were achievable, as well as.
Well, I guess that's
still
what I
very
mean. It's like,
aggressive.
how did you evaluate achievability if you didn't know what the landscape was?
Well, I mean, we knew where it was at that point.
In regards to what Duke was doing?
Well, we didn't have some, like the 2020 grid data, we didn't have that, so it. Now for the pulls on that.
So, I mean, this is more just historical, just trying to understand the landscape. Did you have data that said it was like 30% from Duke at the point where 50% was chosen? And then they came out, is that how it happened?
You can go back and see what the mix was on the E-grid back. That data is available, but when we went through this, we didn't have it in 2020, but it is right now. So
Right.
this mix wasn't what it was when the task force was in place.
Yeah, I think what I'm driving at is just what went into the decision-making process of 50%. That was something that came out of me when I reviewed this before the meeting. It was like, wow, look, every other city's at 80%. Why did we go to 50? And I didn't know that we didn't have that, which is just a coincidence, it seems like. So I was just trying to piece together how the decision of 50% was arrived at. Because where we're at, we don't need to do anything, and we're good for the next 13 years, as far as I can see it,
Well,
which is not a good place to be when you're trying to push yourself.
I agree.
Right.
That's why I was mentioning when totally aggressive, but again, as 50 doesn't mean we can't exceed it.
So May 16th. Next Monday? I think so. Duke Energy will drop their carbon plan.
Drop or what?
Carbon plan? That'll be at probably, I don't know, probably 4:58, 4:59 p.m. That's what typically things get issued with the Utilities Commission. When it happens, they're gonna lay out a plan on getting to 70% carbon reduction. Over the years, I don't know if it's 2035. I think it is. Maybe 2030. Maybe 2030, but they lay out their carbon plan of 70% reduction. To your point, our goal is 50 by 2035. Theirs is 70 by 2030.
For carbon or energy?
Carbon, which, we're really looking at clean energy, which plays into the carbon plan. So they're gonna shut down coal plants and replace them with other stuff. And so, in my opinion, when that comes out, I think it has a 60 or 90-day window where people provide comments to the Utilities Commission. And Duke Energy is not saying this is the plan you need to choose. They're saying these are the plans. You Utilities Commission go out and pick one that's best for everybody, and public staff from the Utilities Commission will get involved. After that happens, that'll be a good data point for us to understand where our facilities are going to be as it relates to the state, and help us. I mean, if it gets to 70%, then to your point, we've done nothing. We don't have to do anything, but that gives us an opportunity to maybe go back to City Council and say, we want more aggressive goals. We don't want more aggressive goals, or there's no reason to do anything because it's already being done by this legislation. There's a lot of stuff for that.
I can answer a bit about the historic, like why we had it set for those things. When the Clean Energy Advisory Ad Hoc Committee was set up by the mayor, it was given to us that the purpose of the resolution that formed the Ad Hoc Clean Energy Policy Task Force was by 2035 to transition to 50% clean energy and electrify 50% of the city's vehicle fleet, and then by 2050 to do 100% clean energy from fossil fuel powered municipal operations to 100%. So those goals were kind of just passed on to us when we got into the Ad Hoc Clean Energy Task Force. But I think if what I'm hearing correct is like, I think it's totally fair to say, yeah, we're really close to it. We should be more aggressive in the interim.
Well, I agree to wait for information we know is coming out of the pipeline, but to get ahead of the game, admittedly, it does seem like when that information comes out and we can organize around it. This was really interesting to see the case studies of the other cities, because it just puts the context on the whole thing. And when I read through it, the only one I saw that we were equal with was Winston-Salem, and everybody else was more aggressive, which is the type of precedent the city council will need to see that we're not where we could be. It seems like a no-brainer from here, and it's never that simple, but to be more aggressive than what was handed to the task force. I mean, I could ask the question, why did the task force get handed 50% and 100%? But I mean, it's not really important. But that's the through play, and we're already there. Like, we need to be more aggressive.
Well, maybe when we find out this information, we need to figure out like what sort of transition needs to happen to get to 50%, very little, but to 80% too. Is that even achievable? Like before we say, hey, let's go to 75 or 80, like what has to happen to get there?
Part of it, yeah, totally. And I think part of that is, if it was me, I would be calling all of these cities and saying, well, how does Asheville, how are you going to do 100% by 2030, right? Like, how are you actually going to do that? And maybe they have a great answer, right? They don't.
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
We were all together on Savannah last week, so we had these conversations.
Okay.
And I agree that, as Sean said too, is once we get this information from Duke and it goes through Utilities Commission, there's a docket out on it, and they have a final ruling. That should be a point where we should be having the discussion and figure out what our plan is going to be. Because if we sat here today and said, you know what, let's change our goals to 75%. The carbon plan gets us there, we're back to square one again. But we're not more aggressive than the carbon plan already laid out. If that's what our intention is, to be more aggressive than.
Just to speak to the riddle that's never gonna not be here, is how does the carbon plan impact the energy plan? It's like that is not clear. clear enough for me to think about yet.
So the state's carbon plan, that's what the governor set out to do, was reduce carbon emissions, which is basically shutting down fossil fuel burning facilities, specifically coal. Those assets can't just come offline and provide power for the entire state still. They have to be replaced with something. And there's carve-outs in there to replace them with offshore wind, battery storage, solar. I mean, you guys were at that state energy conference. I mean, Kendall Bowman stood up there from Duke Energy talk about this for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So there's a lot of assets that they have to dispense to make up for these fossil burning assets.
Well, it's clear that it does impact it. I guess what I get into is how little control we have over this process. I mean, especially with Duke Energy there.
Yeah, but that's just
The Utilities Commission is going to be here in Wilmington. I don't remember what the date is, July. Yeah, maybe July 7th, maybe 27th. The Utilities Commission is going to be here to have a public forum. They're going to be Raleigh, Greensboro, Asheville, Charlotte, here, and then 2 public forums. I think there's 7 of them. You know, for citizens, or if we wanted to as a community to have voices on what we prefer to see. So I think what I'm saying is we need to see this carbon plan. It's going to be several hundreds of pages. There's models that are being run, and it's something that we probably should evaluate to understand our impact. So it's huge.
Yeah.
Probably gonna be like 600 pages.
Dave, would you be so kind as to tell us what the summary was at was it a city managers meeting or what? I'd be interested to hear what the undertones of all this was. Sustainability Network.
Yes, so it was, other folks on the roll, myself from cities throughout the southeast.
Southeast, okay.
So, you know, and we have some, Virginia is now in there, they just logged into the network. So in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Arkansas.
And sort of a best practices, how are you guys tackling it? What,
Yeah.
like sharing of ideas, how to electrify the fleet, how to get infrastructure for charging, all those types of basic topics.
You know, all stuff that we're all working on.
Was it just power related though? Like was sustainability in general?
Yeah, there's
EGS?
There's waste diversion.
Waste conversion.
Waste diversion.
Oh, okay.
There was one session on, you know, plastic bag bans, another here in Israel, another, you know, here in North Carolina.
Hey, David, on this call, it's kind of hard to hear you. Could you speak up a little bit?
Sure. Here we go. A mic there as well as one here on the computer as well, I think. Can you hear me now, Richard? So I, yeah, folks, I hear.
Yep, I can. Thank you.
So what would you say the main takeaways are that would be relevant for our purposes?
Definitely clean energy, meeting clean energy goals was one of the bigger topics. That's everybody's got their climate plans, everybody's got their greenhouse gas reduction plans. So, yeah, that was a big topic for sure.
What about water reduction?
Yeah, there were discussions on that as well. I think we kind of had to pick and choose which session you went to. I can always go back and pull up the older versions of the water that I was listening to a different session for that.
You mean like conservation?
Yeah, I actually had, I don't remember what her role was, but I got to meet up with lady in Asheville. I think I don't know if she's sustainability. They had goals and I asked, they showed waste, they showed electricity, and I said, well, what about water? She said, no, we don't have a published goal on water.
Yeah,
I'm surprised.
I think cities that had their own, that they ran the water authority. Here we've got CMP way, so which is definitely a huge energy user.
Right.
But since that's under city control,
So the consensus was nobody knows how to get to the commitments that we're making. That's what I want to hear about.
Can I?
I mean, even in our plan, they don't. Let me speak. technology.
Go ahead, Dave, and then I'll get to your answer.
Yeah, so I apologize in advance for confusing you further, because I'm going to. I'm sorry about that. If we go back to 2007, when City Council passed the resolution adopting a 58% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. That's when that was passed. There was no assessment done, no understanding of the path forward. It was a goal that City Council adopted based on the fact that it was part of the, I'll probably get this coalition wrong, but the mayor's clean climate pact or something. I can't remember the name of it. But that was a request for mayors nationwide to adopt a goal to establish a 58% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We passed it, and
It was an arbitrary number.
perhaps it was, but did we here locally pass it knowing that we had a path forward to be able to do it? Good question.
What I mean, the 58% was a number that was developed by this overarching pact, not locally in the Wilmington area.
That is correct. That number was given to us by this larger, broader group, and we adopted it. When we did the ad hoc task force, and I don't want to speak for you guys because you all were part of it, but we did not take the time, nor did we really have the time to go through the math and determine within the 9 months that we met exactly what the path was going to be to get from point A to point B. We didn't do that. I think what this group is now is the opportunity to help determine what that path is. Now, 2050 is the end goal. 2035 is kind of the halfway point. What I would say is that we established a 2035 goal related to clean energy that's, at least by what's on this paper, it certainly seems achievable. I don't think it's out of line for this committee to say, well, let's make ourselves a little bit smarter, taking the information from the plan that's getting ready to come out, learn some more stuff about city operations, about city projects, and make a determination of maybe we can get to 60%, and that's reasonable. I don't think we want to go out there and set a goal for 80% and then come up short. We'd rather set a goal for 60% and hit 65. So to me, I think the work behind the path to get there comes from now, not from the ad hoc task force.
Yeah. And the ad hoc task force was like 30 people on one Zoom meeting at a time. It wasn't like,
Four different groups.
yeah, it wasn't the easiest thing to
Trying to hard
communicate with people sometimes. So like I might have gotten like a sentence or two in every meeting. I mean, it's not, you know, it had limitations.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no effort to try to go back and re-engineer more just to understand where it comes from. And I mean, as I get clearer with this, totally agree. I mean, picking a number, that's what we did the first time, which is frankly what we probably had to do, right? Like to get started. And now that we can kind of have learned and can reevaluate, the question should become, you know, and I already asked one that is helpful, how are other cities seeing this? And they don't see it either. Well, that all just feels sort of crazy. So in my mind, again, not knowledgeable enough to even be dangerous yet, is to try to get to an awareness. And I think it already came up. It's like, you know, that gap, what does that cost? Right? Like if we could understand, like for us to move 1%, it was $5 million or whatever the number is, like it would start to just create some kind of understanding of like what's realistic, right? Because I don't really have a sense for that at all. And the other side of that is the Duke Energy piece. Like they've got to have a perspective of some sort. Are they committed to zero, you know, fossil fuels by 2050? If they are, then what are we doing here? They're going to do it for us based on this chart. So, you know what I mean? Like what is the reality? I think I totally agree is productive for this group, because if we're not working within a reality, we're just guessing, and we all know what that's about.
Yes, you asked what the other cities were feeling about their goals and how they were gonna achieve them. I think that shorter term goal, that 2035, 2030, depends on which city you're talking about. That's the one they're worried about and why everybody's paying such close attention to, at least for the North Carolina cities, what Duke's plan is gonna be, because if they just saying we're just gonna replace coal with natural gas, then those cities aren't gonna be able to hit their 100%, especially the ones with 100% renewable.
Yeah, that's the problem is renewable
see, there's a lot of
versus
different-
clean energy, because renewable means no nuclear.
Exactly.
So I
And that
should
kinda
kind of
just-
commitment they can't meet. It seems like it probably was just trying to guess.
That unless they do a lot of more on-site plus some kind of a large scale.
Well, this is it.
Yeah. Which
If
is,
I get something that you brought up, you want to know what the cost is, right?
Mm.
So Dave and I can maybe take a crack at something. There's three things associated with this pie chart that help us, right? One is the little bitty yellow sliver, which is ours. That's project cost, right? I think we can come up with some gauge for you to understand. The second part is the two biggest parts together, and that's Duke's carbon plan that ultimately gets transferred to us based on rates.
Is that carbon plan, because I was just connecting to dots, will that carbon plan say we're gonna get rid of this plant, replace it with X, Y, or Z? That's what that's gonna say.
Yes and no. It's good, as I understand it, it's gonna come out with multiple different paths and options for utilities commission. So Duke Energy's not gonna say, we recommend you doing this. It's gonna say, you can do this, or this. It's making 5, 6, 7 different paths of how to get to these plans. And the utilities commission is gonna pick the one that's the most, in the best interest of the public, as well as the most economical.
When does that happen?
It's, I mean, it's gonna come on the 16th, but the plan's gonna come out.
And when does the utilities commission choose that?
I think they're gonna, if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's a 60-day comment session. And then I believe September 16th is when they would choose to open a docket for evidence hearings if they choose to move forward.
And then that wouldn't be the end of the project, so it seems to me we wouldn't be able to put together a plan until they do. I'm off track, am I right?
Well, I think you can still make progress.
Yeah, you make progress.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's fine.
That's okay. The one other thing, and y'all have identified this as well, is conservation or efficiencies, right? If we're more efficient with the things that we're using now, and we're using less energy, that makes it easier for us to cut down the amount of energy it takes to get to 50%, 60%, right?
I did some quick math on that while we were sitting here. If we cut our energy usage from 2021 by 10%, 9.4 million kilowatt hours, that would take the 1.3% that the city generates in its own power, 1.5%. 0.2.
That's helpful. 10% reduction in efficiencies gets us halfway to our goal.
No.
Usage.
It brings our 1.3% of clean energy that we generate on the site in the city.
So
From 1.3 to 1.5.
right, which halves the gap.
That halves the gap, that's right. But that also takes energy efficiency projects, and that's not including anything you guys have on the plans for additional solar or additional renewables.
I see what you're tracking there. That's helpful. And Dave, I see what you're tracking. If you, I mean, you could almost get to what was the cost of these solar projects, you know? And then once we understand the budget for that, and then what that did to impact based on the code. I keep talking about the math, but I could probably write it down better. But yeah, that seems doable, at least in the ballpark.
121 kilowatts. I don't know what you guys paid for that. That's about what it is.
He's already halfway there, so that's.
But don't you also have to think about how many solar panels you can put on rooftops? I mean, too, there's a limit.
And is that, I mean, it sounds like rooftops are prime, but are there any plans? Well, maybe that's the question. Are there any plans to do it not on rooftops? Like,
Well, why can't the city partner with anybody who's building new buildings to lease the space on top?
oh, of course they could. I'm just seeing it done in other places. I'm curious. And it does make
So it
sense.
costs money, so we gotta be fiscally responsible too.
And Andrea's been sharing those two draft plans with everyone. If you're getting things on your email,
Yeah.
that's what she's sending us right now, so everyone can take a peek at them.
I mean, they've had stakeholder meetings for months. I've been on all of them. And, it's gonna be a big document. And I'm pretty sure it's September 15th is if they decide to move forward with something different. Not different, but have evidentiary hearings.
I'll read the executive summary.
I was told the executive summary is several pages long.
I can handle that.
Yes.
It's interesting that they're waiting. The offshore lease drops before, May 11th, I think is one of the
Yeah.
offshore lease. The wind section.
Want me to lease?
Yeah. Just as far as who may be interested in bidding for development.
Yeah, I'll be interested because Duke is involved. They've never done offshore development, so it'll be interesting if they win it to see how quickly they actually move forward.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess it's beyond 2030.
Yeah.
I mean, look how long the meetings been working. They've only got two.
Yeah, but that's a different project. It's still, yeah, it's probably 5 to 10 years.
So if I was to make a recommendation, I'd say, hey, if we want to change our goals and be more aggressive, we probably should wait till the carbon plan comes out and see where the next total is. Because the last thing you want to do is say, hey, we're going to go to 70%, and find out you get to 7%. Hell's purpose must be. I'm still an advocate of energy efficiency, so.
That should be our foundation.
Do we have an estimate on what we can do with efficiency? Like, do we have an understanding of what's not efficient and what it would be if it was?
Yeah, we'll track energy performance of all of our facilities, so certainly look at where we would get the most bang for the buck. So targeting our least efficient buildings, highest energy users. So those would be,
That's a good start. Maybe another good.
but as far as specific actions, we're still.
Well, I guess a way into that though is if you've got a building that you know you nailed, right? And then you've got a building that you haven't, see what the difference is based on similar kilowatt hours usage. We'd understand the budget of what it takes to create that better position. And then if you do the number of buildings, you just extrapolate that out on the delta, and then you do a budget. I mean, it's maybe not exact, but at least it'll give you a, man, we can move 10% on efficiency sort of bullet point, right?
Capital projects. Please make course, we got some additional work.
Process of it right now.
Would that be the furthest up, you're thinking the furthest one along?
Police HQ always tops the list. It's a big facility, 24/7, all kinds of special uses going on in there.
But you can baseline these or comparatively with different metrics. So kilowatt hours per square foot, kilowatt hours per person, kilowatt hours per working hour, because it's 24/7, so you can have a comparison. And then you look at some buildings are old, so you're going to be worse. It'd be different if the whole entire city consolidated and moved into the PPD building. And if it was
Ooh, is that an option?
No, I've thought about it.
I'm wondering what's gonna happen to that building, but anyway.
But you know, as you have multiple older buildings, it's hard to compare, but that's how you compare.
Yeah, well, it's never gonna be exact.
It gives you a baseline.
How much of energy efficiency comes from education versus actually like installation of things?
Probably a decent amount, but probably not as much as you think. I think a lot of this is facilities related, right? So you can't turn lights off. You can't really change temperatures in buildings as much as you used to be able to. We have, auditability is probably the biggest thing. NC State used to offer a audit program. I don't know if they still do, it's free to come in and audit your facilities, give you recommendations.
We've done some of that in the past. We've also just completed facility condition assessment that looks at life cycle issues associated with all different components of building, from carpet to the roof to the HVAC system, to the lighting. That'll be another way that we can look at it. I understand what you were saying, Evan, and I think that makes more sense when you're talking about a fleet of buildings that are more similar. We have very distant, we have groups of facilities that are similar, like the operations center. All those facilities out there are very similar. All the fire stations are very similar. A lot of the recreation facilities are similar. But across the gamut, I think we'd have to parse it up to do it the way you're doing it. The other way that we could look at it is, age of our components within those buildings. If I got a 20-year-old HVAC unit that's still running, and I can replace it with a newer technology, much more efficient HVAC system, might even be smaller, higher performing system, that's gonna yield me some savings right there, right on the gate. We've got that. We don't have a final report for that, but we're talking about the data this morning.
What are some of the facility improvements that's going on over fire headquarters right now? And some of the additional ones that are coming.
Well, this past year, we put in a building management system in our fire headquarters. That was a big improvement. We're currently doing that right now in City Hall. We've just replaced 2 chillers and air handler over at police headquarters. Those are probably our largest projects that we've had going on related to big energy using components within those.
What's your savings on that on a yearly basis?
I haven't gotten there yet.
Need to do a do rebate with chill over fire or police headquarters.
Something that comes to mind is it's 2 things. I don't know if these connect, but I'll just say them out loud. One is, I'd be curious on what other cities' footprint is in regards to the energy that they're producing in relation to the total. That would be really interesting to know. I don't know if they have the 1.3 number that you generated there or not. I think that would be something that city council may be impacted by to see, because that's clearly a way of measuring, lack of a better word, commitment towards these goals, right? Because that efficiency or that technology would have been invested in some way. And the other one is,
it very much varies depending on what operations various cities have. Some have new operations that we have, like some of them their own water utilities, some have their transit systems and facilities.
So it's a little bit apples to oranges.
well, look, it's always going to be, but this is city, right?
Remind me
So
what
it's still relevant.
% of our carbon footprint is fleet? Isn't that like?
It's over 63.
So that's really where the bang for the buck is going to come from, right? It's just a matter of how expensive.
Yeah, well, again, that's just like our kind of a hard number. We just said we're going to convert 50% of the fleet. So that's just X number of vehicles. Those 2.
But I'm thinking about that, right? Carbon's not energy, so.
Well, it's an electric vehicle puts less carbon into the atmosphere.
That doesn't help with a clean energy goal.
Oh,
Well,
different goals. Yeah, 2 different goals.
Yeah, but
That's the wrinkle.
I mean,
It's
I mean,
always-
we don't produce energy, so.
The electrification of the fleet is actually going to add a bit to our usage, utility or electricity usage. So
That's the.
But I know, but I mean, carbon footprint is important.
Yeah,
I
sure.
know that's not specifically what we're talking about when we talk about energy, but.
Oh, it's definitely important. I mean, that's, to be honest with you, one of the reasons why I showed up to this was for carbon, but that's in the first meeting, we parsed that out, and it's a risk. I don't know, I'm an expert, I'm just trying to practice and make sure that I've got the right lens on when we're talking about whatever we're talking about.
But that's in the carbon plan too. They're gonna make an assumption of electrification of, because their load's gonna grow because of that.
Right.
They gotta offset that somehow.
Do you, in a perfect world, would you love to hire a consultant to come in and crunch things for you and run around and measure buildings? And would that be helpful to you? Is that something that at some point we, because people who spend their lives doing this, can probably crunch a lot of this data quickly for you. And is that something that would be helpful for us if we looked into that and made recommendations to city council?
I would say a lot of other cities that have used vendors, consultants to kind of help go through this, and especially as they're kind of developing strategies and goals to achieve them.
I think that's a good discussion for one of the next two items that we have to cover on.
You can't evaluate what you can't see. So the first
Yeah.
question is, do you have the meters in place in the right spots to know what you have? I mean, you can look at it and say, hey, I know my building's this, but I remember I had asked this question from the task force. What percentage of your building's HVAC versus lighting versus? Don't have green card or any of that.
We have per building, mostly. Some of it, like Legion Stadium.
I think you don't see there, very little.
No, but you have stadium lights. Yeah. That's not separated from the support facilities. All right. Yeah. So it's a mixed bag.
But I mean, I know that there are tremendous resources out there. They can come in and quickly and efficiently say, okay, how much do you want to spend? What do you want to know? Here's what we can tell you if you want, if you want this package or that package, and kind of help you with your roadmap. Because I love doing this, but this isn't my specialty, and I'm wondering if that is going to be helpful to you, and if it's something we should, especially once.
What are we talking about? Just like energy efficiency or
Yeah,
everything?
there are consulting firms that come in and say, we want to do this by 2030, we want to do this by 2035. What's the best way to do it? What's the most cost efficient way for the city to do this? And, the city has an obligation to not waste money. That's part of, so.
Well, we're doing a good job of that.
As a taxpayer, I'd be like, hire somebody who knows this stuff and get them in there and tell us what to do. And I know a lot of this stuff, but sometimes getting that outside, invoking alternate authority is what I call it with my kids. I'm like, well, what did your coach say?
Well,
Sometimes you need somebody to kind of.
Cities get advisors and consultants for all kinds of.
Exactly. So I'm just wondering where in the process that might be helpful to say, let's, And did you guys talk about that at your sustainability regional meeting?
Yeah, I mean, so the reports were presented, almost all of those were by outside.
Right.
Entities to kind of come in.
What kind of money are we talking about? I don't even know. A couple million for a top to bottom assessment and recommendation plan?
If it was that high.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
It depends on the side of the city, frankly.
I mean, you wouldn't tell them, hey, go look at every building.
you would not.
Yeah, I think they would figure out which ones are the biggest things to do.
Yeah.
You give them
I want to look
access.
at a well pump down the street. That's considered a piece of property.
How many buildings does the city have?
Well, we got 1.3 million square feet.
Well, and I mean, they might come in and say, you guys need to consolidate, or you need to build a new green building and let these build, who knows what they would say. But I think, we can go around and around and around. At some point, it's probably going to be helpful to at least do a one pass with a consultant saying, make sure we're best practices, and tell us what would be the reach for the moon plan, what would be a reasonable plan, what would be a minimal plan. I mean, I think that would be
Or
great.
how about just like reviewing one of the reports from one of these contractors and just seeing what all's involved and, you know.
That's where my mom, I'd go to those people that were given those reports. And
Well, you could probably get a consulting firm to come in and give us a 1-hour presentation for free. And tell us what they
Why don't we use the resources that are here in the city already, the students?
students.
Yeah. Let's do it. We have a school, engineering school, one of the high schools, right?
Well, I agree at some point it does make sense to bring somebody in. I don't know enough about all of this to even be helpful in that yet. So I think, getting that piece figured out is helpful, but I do agree there's a way to put together a 1, 2, 3, and this is what people do for a living sort of thing. And at that point, it makes sense. The flip to that is that if we're already at our goal, 2022, how does the city council see the need to spend whatever that is to do this if our goals aren't in line with the need to do anything? So that's part of the equation, but I wanted to ask this question because every state, I mean, nothing's ever going to be apples to apples in any of this, but especially when we have different states with different energy postures. I mean, I'm no expert here, but Duke Energy is a monopoly, more or less, right?
Regulated monopoly.
Fair enough, same thing, more or less. But point is, other states have a different landscape, right? So I don't know enough about how that impacts. I mean, it seems like it restricts us. Maybe it doesn't. I have no idea. But understanding that would be helpful. And then when I see things like City of Asheville, 100% renewable energy, that almost feels like a protest of sorts, right? Like rather than something that's real. And if that's the case, I'd be interested in their mindset, their thought process. But literally, like, are they allowed to do that? Like I just heard you say the electrical commission decides on Duke's choices. Like, again, I don't know anything about that, but if the state is making a decision on the choices Duke is bringing to the table, does the city have the ability to operate outside of that decision, right? Like,
They can
or
map
not.
it by their
Like,
solar.
I just don't understand how all that works, so.
Well, I mean, that's kind of where that advocacy piece comes in, and the comment period that's coming, the opportunity to provide public comment, that's where you have the ability as a city, local governments to weigh in on.
Well, that's one thing, telling them, commenting, what I'm talking about is understanding, like internally, like what power do we have, right?
No, we can't like change the grid that much. It's just the influence from talking with them or, giving our comments. We can't just build a nuclear power plant. Like,
Well, so this is my point. If we can't do that, then, what can we do? Not much, it doesn't feel like, right? So like,
well,
are you following what I'm saying, or?
When more we reduce our load through energy efficiency, which we talked about, we're going to grow our load anyway. The solar projects become a higher percentage. The more we put online, it becomes a higher percentage.
Right, but if Duke is, in this report, if they come out and they say, look, we're gonna move to 60% by 2050.
70% by 2030, but
I don't know what it is, but the point is that we're gonna have to follow what they're doing, right? Within the big picture. So it seems to me if we don't know what they're doing, we're just gonna be guessing. And that's somewhat, and I could be wrong about this, but it feels somewhat unique relative to other states that may have more freedom, or again, this is where I lose the thread. I'm trying to figure out what our energy reality is in relation to what other people are doing, so that when we look at other people and them doing it, it's not like, oh, we can do that when we can't, right? Does that make sense? And I don't even know if
yeah, you probably need someone with a lot of experience to tell you that
this is
answer.
the point of bringing it up.
And I don't.
But it's a very large conversation.
Yeah.
That's like days long.
well, we can go above and beyond the 70% that Duke Energy is going to do. One of our options is obviously to do a virtual PPA. We buy renewable energy credits, which is most of these cities are going to be looking at.
Yeah.
Which is Asheville, I mean, they already have an RFP out there for one they're looking.
And that a consultant might come in here and say that's your best bet.
Right.
I think that's what anybody with some of the
That's
record
basic.
goals, if they're all looking at having to do some kind of a large
But as the final step, that's the last thing you do.
That's.
Yeah,
all
you
about
do
the
everything you can to your grid first, and then you purchase the rest.
Yeah, so you got the utility grid doing what they can do.
Right.
Then you have you offsetting by your renewables and energy efficiency, tie both those together. Then your last lever before you eject is buy Rex.
Where do these wrecks come from though? Like, I mean, is it like in the middle of Texas
It's like
where?
monopoly money, but yes. I mean, it's, you got wind farms.
Yeah.
Out in Texas and Oklahoma and Mexico, and we have all these solar farms all over the place. I mean, there's a huge one that's going up in Indiana.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge.
So like they're not feeding into.
Thousands of acres.
I don't know, that seems odd. Like it might be double dipping. I mean,
Well,
so
it's because they're IPPs, right? Independent power producers, and they're selling into a deregulated market. So like somebody in North Carolina, like the Canita solar farm that's in northeast North Carolina, that sells in the PGM. And that's how it's being, and somebody can go and buy those energy credits.
They can't sell more than they have, so that's why they're.
So when you say unregulated, you just mean, like it's regulated to the extent that they can't sell fake.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
can only say kilowatt hours that they produce. They
Yeah,
can
but like
sell
if I wanted to build a solar farm in North Carolina, you'd have to go get the utilities commission's permission.
Okay.
The deregulated market's a lot easier. You don't have a owner of, they have multiple energy producers on grids that's owned by multiple people. It's really deregulated markets. I don't understand it as much as
Got it.
regulated monopoly that we have here.
So what permission, if any, does the city need to get to put a solar farm from the Energy Commission?
Well, there's like their interconnection queue, you can't just build it and jam it into the grid. They have to be able to handle the load that you're producing. So, and the grid interconnection has gotten better, but it used to be like a crazy long queue.
I think the limitation in size for net metering, I think it's 1 megawatt.
Yes.
If you're producing more than you actually take off and you want to sell it back to them, there's a certain limit you can be. And there's rules.
Even for the size solar that you want to put on a rooftop, there's certain rules you can't just put on.
So I know that we're not quite done with that, but a lot of this conversation is going into items 4 and 5. So I feel like we have 25 minutes left. Do we want to keep talking about this, or do we want to continue with the agenda?
I mean, I think the sticking point is we have to wait and see what the carbon plan is. We probably need to give us a group to discuss it, or have, maybe have Duke Energy come in and explain it to us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna be, like I said, several hundred pages. Be big. Sean's already volunteered just to read it.
Executive summary.
Summary of the policy.
I mean, we kind of talked about item 4, right? Other NC cities.
Yeah, I think we kind of
wanna-
that as well, but if there was anything that.
It would be interesting, yeah. Anything you guys said?
It'd be interesting to know what their annual spend is on hitting these objectives.
On the companies,
Yeah, how much money have they carved out to hit these objectives?
I know, I think the Buncombe County one, I listed the number in there for, I think there's looking at $10 million that they're looking for.
39 buildings.
39.
And how did they go about getting that, wasn't there a big solar farm built up there for Asheville?
They're putting one on, close cell of, their landfill. I forget how big it is, but it's pretty good size.
But that all had to be done in cooperation with Duke, right? And, yeah.
Anything, any solar you put on, it's gotta be in cooperation with Duke. Yeah, I mean, item 5 was, again, just, was up for discussion, particularly, you know, and I want to bring up, and Andrea, the point that you brought up, in regard to like item number 7, foster participation, is kind of, really encompasses kind of the equity component in everything that we're looking at. Even though that was, you know, item 7, and, you know, the way we're ranking things, you brought up the point that, you know, it should really be a strategy across all of our efforts, which I totally agree with. In regard to anything we're doing, we need to keep that equity, to make sure we're, you know, even though we're mostly looking at municipal operations, whatever we can do that influence things around the community, include that equity component into it is extremely important. So I think we should have that lens on, you know.
So what's the objective with this? Is it focus on the top 3, or what's the objective here?
It's really to listen to y'all, find out what information you want to know from us. And then to Jessica's point, you know, what vehicles would y'all like for us to consider, or should we consider in trying to move those specific items forward? And I would offer this in reference to what Jessica was saying about a consultant earlier. That you can weigh in on this too. The energy efficiency is something from a cost effectiveness being over facilities management, my department. It's much more about life cycle for a lot of our larger building components. Lighting is a different story. It's more about a conversion. We've been pretty successful at doing some conversions at decent costs. More challenging for us, much more challenging for us, is the conversion of our fleet. I would say that we would probably benefit much more from some direction, outside direction, and assistance with conversion of our fleet, rather than energy efficiency of our buildings, because we have expertise.
Got it.
We've got a lot of data about our buildings. We've just gathered a whole bunch of data about the age of all of the components of our facilities.
Is the objective of that, I'd be interested in how many buildings the city has. Do you know ballpark?
It's 75-ish.
Okay, because that's not overwhelming, you know, that's just 75 line items. I'd be curious, maybe this is too granular, but it's not my mind, to go through each building, and if you got life cycle on big components, we know what those are. There's a percentage, this one's 75% to its life, whatever, right? And then you've got an understanding of everything else, and you just have compartments. So a building has 4 compartments, and here's the percentage, and here's the overall percentage of efficiency, if you will, right? And you just have a quick look at it and see it, and then you could have an overall, 55% increase in efficiency or whatever at the end of it. So that seems like a math exercise, and you've already got some things going on in the buildings, and that idea of help with the fleet. Like, again, I'd lose the thread there, because that's carbon, right? And it's going to increase the energy. So it just
But it's still a goal.
It's still the goal, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
50%.
I mean, we're the group talking about outside stuff.
I know, guys, but for this group, right? This is what we started at. Like, our objective is not carbon here.
My objective as a human being and a taxpayer and a member of this committee is to help move the ball forward.
So is mine, but so is everybody.
But you're here. This is a quasi-government body. You're allowed to have agents. And, if it's bringing a couple of Teslas over to the cops and letting them hit the accelerator and showing them how fast they go, that, who knows if a consultant would say, yeah, do that. That always helps. I mean, the cop cars are a lot of our fleet. Little things like that could be, could really help get the ball moving. So that's why I'm trying to be open to that.
So Jessica, I hear what you're saying, and it's not my opinion that disagrees with you. I totally agree with you. That's not what I'm hearing from what our objective is. So I'm gonna throw it back to y'all and say, and just ask the question, how does help with the fleet, is that part of our purview? Because I'm hearing that it is, but if it's carbon, I sort of say, well, okay, how do
It is, isn't it? I mean,
It is, because
It's two things.
By 2035, we want to reduce municipal.
we're going around and around, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so our objective as this group is both.
And reduce, replace 50% of our fleet with electric.
And that's the charter of our, that's not what I heard in our first meeting. And then maybe it was me that didn't hear it, right?
It was part of the goal stated from the beginning. So, and then by 2050, both of those go to 100. So while it's separate, somewhat separate from the carbon clean energy part, it's still kind of separate. Let's say both the 2035 and 2050 goals, they both kind of have 2 line items for us to achieve. The clean energy part and the food part.
So y'all are good to start proposing a city policy to increase the organic matter of the soil to offset emissions in this group? Do you see what I'm driving at here?
We're talking about carbon.
I mean, where is the line, right? Which is what the emissions from converting the electric fleet is. Even though it has to do with electricity, it's not increasing efficiency, it's reducing efficiency, but it's carbon. And I get it, and that's critically important.
Reducing carbon emissions into the air.
Which has nothing to do with electricity. True. That's my point. So I hear what you're saying, and I think that we should tackle both. My opinion is we should start with carbon and follow with electricity, but that's not how it's charrette formed, right? So when we start talking about fleet emissions, I lose the thread of the objective that I'm trying to find.
We're not really talking about fleet emissions, we're talking about 50% of them have to be electric. The benefit of it.
But the reason, well, what's the reason we're doing that?
I don't know why.
Emissions, right?
Diesel energy is still dirtier than the Duke energy.
Charter.
Say that again?
Cars that run on diesel, medium, heavy loads that run on diesel are still dirtier energy than the clean energy goals of purchasing something else from Duke or others. Hybrid Duke. So it's still energy. It's not electricity, but this is the clean energy goals.
Yeah, plugging an electric car in is cleaner.
I'll keep
They're
pressing.
hitting
I'm still not
inside.
clear on all that, but I hear what y'all are saying.
Great discussion.
yeah, just
So-
think of those two things and that's it.
So,
They're gonna stay in our lane, it's tough. Because they interview, like you said.
Yeah.
should we, how does it work if you want to start looking at, the possibility of issuing an RFP for helping with electrification? How does that work?
I thought we had to come up with, not standards, but purchasing policies first.
Do we?
I don't think
I don't know how it
think you
works.
guys have a purchasing policy, a widespread one for buying electric vehicles.
Yeah, what's the algorithm?
Right? That's by the state.
Typically off of co-op contract.
So they work for purchasing power, is that what you're talking about? This is like really outside my lane.
Yeah. There's a handful of different organizations that solicit contracts for desks all the way up to excavators. We'll solicit contracts, and then as a municipality, we can use that contract to forego a bidding process.
Oh, got it, okay. So just to streamline, because you guys know you're gonna need X amount of cop cars every year, X amount of trucks every. Okay.
And there are electric vehicle options. I wouldn't say they're plentiful, but there are some that are out there. I don't know, did y'all get y'all's off of state or?
No, we can use any contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
We
not
have a little bit
obligated.
more flexibility.
What did you get? Some leaves?
There's one Leaf, one, it's an SUV. I don't remember it. I'm sorry, I was just looking at other cars. I can't remember, but I can send it to you.
Chapel Hill was able to source, I think they got 150 license coming. I think they got it through the Sheriff's Association.
And then the city of Charlotte's trying to lease theirs in the meantime, which is complicated. But I just know that they're doing that.
Well, and it took us a good year to figure out the logistics of how far can you go, how convenient is it, which people's routes does it work, how often are you going to plug in? It's just switching out is not obviously straightforward because you got to factor that in. So there was some research that went into it, obviously, but.
Yeah, sorry, it's a Chrysler Pacifica, a Kia Niro, and a Nissan Leaf.
They're all 100% electric.
Mhm.
One's PHEV. Okay, plug-in. I've never heard that. Anyway, yeah, so.
I think they were just trying to run them on pure electrons.
Yeah.
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 All right, well, maybe that's the next step. Since it's on our triage list up at the top. Number 2.
Yeah, I know, I think Charlotte, they shared a spreadsheet you can work through with your existing fleet. I think that's what they used. They were developing their policy, plug in their fleet vehicles and kind of which ones would make the most sense to replace first. Something we could run ours through. Perhaps our fleet manager to look at that. That came out of my meeting last week. It's the tool that one of the sessions was kind of highlighting. Which was pretty interesting.
Did they generate this themselves, or was this something from a?
I think they got it from a consultant that they used that was looking at a study for them.
Would a snapshot of our fleet and a snapshot of our facilities be
Right.
helpful?
That'd be great.
666 vehicles of what types, and same for our facilities.
So maybe take a step into that and understand how it can be helpful. And, like if we're looking at that,
Maybe the age of the vehicle would help
what can we help with in regards to looking at that? I mean, I'd like to see it because it's information, but I'm just trying to help.
To me, I think it helps build the foundation upon which we try to make forward progress.
Yeah, we help. The goal would be to help city council justify going ahead with purchases. And if I remember correctly, I mean, they burn through cop cars. Like cop cars, they keep them for like 2 and 4 years. So every single budget cycle, there's a big chunk of change that goes to new cop cars.
There's 300 plus police vehicles.
Yeah.
And
And they don't drive them for 7 and 8 years. They drive them very.
there's some, they drive them longer than you think.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean,
That would help. Here's the life cycle of the car.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
But each car probably has a different function. Somebody who's driving around all day long
Right.
versus somebody who's sitting on here.
Right.
I mean, it's easier said than done, but like in my mind, it's like, here's a car we use for this purpose, it's 7 years, for this purpose, it's 3 years. Here's the life of the car, here's the overall life cycle of our fleet.
And and they have a matrix about for gas combustion cars, they have to factor in how many miles and how expensive it is to keep that type of, and an electric vehicle is much lower in maintenance. So that's the kind of thing where we could get outside help saying, well, if you go ahead and convert 10% of your fleet now, it'll reduce your maintenance costs later. It'll also extend the life. So that's one of the reasons they get out of it. They get rid of the cars because they know it'll start costing them more and more. That data is, I know it's all out there. It's very well established. And the fleet managers, it's a matter of plugging in the numbers. And then I know for a while, I guess after 2008, we didn't buy cop cars for like 3 years because of the financial crisis. And then they bought like a whole bunch of cars like in 2012 or something. But based on the budget, they want to turn the cars over as soon as it makes sense for them to do so. I also know that cops like to have new cars, and it's part of their professional package. So anyway, I think that would be a great place to maybe pull in some numbers and start looking at things. And because we want to be able to provide information to the city council that says, yes, you're justified to do this. You know, they have a fiduciary responsibility to spend the tax dollars well. And so we would be helping them.
But like, yeah, I have one question about that. So like if the goal is 50% electric vehicles and they go through cars every 4 years, so would we advise just 4 years before the deadline, buy all these cars?
Right.
Because I mean, if you buy an EV vehicle now, it's not going to help you in 2030, right? I mean, if they go through them that quickly.
Well,
I don't know.
I bet they won't be going through them as quickly. That was one of the points I was making.
Yeah.
The reason they have to get new cars so often is because of their combustion engines. Taking care of a combustion engine is, things break down over time and it becomes expensive. Electric cars don't have all those moving parts, and it's going to extend the lifetime.
We don't talk about it in the life cycle. We talk about replacement cycle.
Yeah.
So my trash trucks right now are 8 years. That's what I get out of it.
You get 8 years out of it, and then it's too expensive, or it's just, that's how long it lasts.
So unfortunately, we had to deallocate our grant to replace one trash truck with an electric trash truck, unfortunately. But the anticipated life cycle that we thought we would have with the electric trash truck was 12 years. Right? For all the points that you just made.
So talk a little bit about how did this reality come up in that, I mean, it had to because we had city council more or less had said you had to go find a grant for that, right? Or did we ask city council to pay for a new?
Grant.
Well, I'm just curious how it works. Like, did we say, city council, can you pay for this? And they're like, no, we got to find a grant for that? Or did y'all come saying, we're going to find a grant for this?
We were actually approached by a vendor that brought a grant opportunity with it.
And that generated
We took it to city council.
Got it.
As an opportunity.
Okay, that's helpful. So what I'm curious about is just starting to think through these what'd you call it? Replacement cycles. That's a finite thing. It's measurable. We can tell where we're at in our process of all the cars based on its replacement cycle. That's pretty straightforward. So at the point where, like you said, when we didn't buy cars, but now we got to buy a bunch of them. Like, and at that point, it wouldn't have come up because that was 2012, whatever, right? Now, will it come up? Like, how does that work in terms of the city? In other words, like, if the city council gets a request for a replacement cycle, how often does that happen? And when it does happen?
Every year.
Once a year?
I mean, we got 666 pieces of our fleet. There's a certain number of things that are up for replacement every single year.
Right, but that just happens annually is all I'm trying to clarify.
Correct.
Right, so if that happens annually, last time that came up, what did this come up?
No, they don't have,
That was off cycle.
What was
It was off.
it's not a criticism, I'm just trying to get through it.
But there's all sorts of things at play. I mean, we had to find a truck that we still had, it was pre-2008, that we could salvage and make sure part of the conditions of the grant were we drilled a hole in the engine block, right? And so it was completely off cycle that we did any of that opportunity.
We're talking about the trash truck.
Yes.
Right, I'm just talking in general. Like, when was the last time a replacement cycle dialogue was entertained by city council for cars?
It's a routine thing. They don't even talk about it.
Well, this is what I'm drilling down on. It should be, right? If we're sitting here charged with needing to impact this by city council, that needs to come up at the moment where they're talking about replacement.
Let me back up a second. The city operates our fleet through an enterprise fund, right? So the financial management of our fleet is separate from the general fund. Property tax revenue is general fund. All of the departments that have fleet pay money they essentially lease vehicles from the fleet fund. And the fleet fund, they buy the new vehicles, they maintain the existing vehicles, and they put gas and oil into the existing vehicles. They're the maintenance arm of it. So when I have to buy a new pickup truck, I'm paying three things. I'm paying for insurance, I'm paying for maintenance, and I'm paying for replacement. So when I buy that truck, I gotta front the money. If it's a new truck that I'm buying and add to the fleet, I'm paying the full value of that truck, and then I start paying for replacement costs, maintenance costs, and insurance costs. So that in 8 years, when I have to replace it, the money is already sitting there.
It's like a revolving fund. Is that what enterprise
Yeah.
fund means, guys?
And what that does is that does not up in the apple cart to the general fund by saying, oh, Dave needs a new pickup truck. Let's add 25,000 to his annual operating budget to buy that. You don't have to do that because the money's already sitting reserved. And that's not the only, we do that with IT. We have a computer replacement fund. So that every 5 years, when our computer technology is out of date, it's just part of the process.
So I think
Does that help?
it helps. I'm not quite there yet. I don't think we have time, but I think that would be helpful to understand because because I'm not 100% clear, but if there's not an articulation at the point of purchase in regards to what type of vehicle and why, there should be in order for us to have control over
And that's a policy question.
whatever question that's asking to someone, that needs to be raised, because if we're just going through the motion and this is more expensive than that, even though, to your point, we're saving money in the true cost accounting, that can't be seen at the point of decision, and then we're just this, right? So the true cost accounting needs to come at the point of decision to purchase so that we can spend more or however that process works, allocate more to buy more, or how do we make progress?
Your purpose in saying that is really geared more for what we're buying to replace it with.
Well, I think so, because if we're buying what we had, we're still got the same number of gas vehicles,
I mean,
right?
what you're talking about is a policy, purchasing policy.
Okay, yeah, I think that's what I'm saying.
I could share the purchasing policy that was shared with me from another North Carolina city. That would be helpful to see the process.
Yeah, that would help me. And it would also help to just really understand what you just said in a way that I can.
So I think, sorry to interrupt, this is a good place to wrap it up, and we're a little bit past our time, but for the next meeting, it sounds like looking at those options for the CEP with some explanation, as well as maybe just what you have for optimization. Efficiencies is what we're looking for.
So our next meeting in June, or July?
We have a schedule for June. Sure, nothing, but yeah.
All of that. Do you have any last comments?
Can I have one quick request?
Yes.
On that spreadsheet that you sent out of other cities, if that could be converted to a Google sheet, and if you could drop in the links to where you found all of those plans, just by kind of hopping in and reading through. I selected a couple that I could find and sent them out to the email group, but it looks like a lot of those cities did work with consultants, and it's really helpful to kind of see what their process was. If you could drop the links that you pulled that data from, I think that might be helpful too, to kind of review before our next meeting as well, just for comparison.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to end?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Excellent.
I
Thanks.
second.
Thank you.
No doubt.
Noise.
Still pick up.
Thank you.
Just in time.
No. Have a
Don't
good
get
day,
a
everybody.
speeding ticket.
Thank you.
Bye. Yeah, I think some cops want some tests. That's fine. I think we should get them.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Thank you very much. It's always helpful when you explain things to us. And I know.
I love the world too much.
See you later.
Yeah, State actually tested some vehicles with solar panels on the roof for police cars, so they never have to use.
Oh, wow. I don't know so much about it. I know that the electric vehicle market is just going vertical. And
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have 90% of the fleet by